thanks for making it. Zircon, good to see you. Trisha Wood, SM Kovalinsky says good afternoon. Zenaida Rivera, Get from Sweden, says it's midnight. There's also midnight here. Adora Guy, Pauline Buckles, a lot of our regular folk that are in here. Two Dog Night, good to see all of you. So this is really going to be the final look at the affidavit, and it's got quite a interesting finale in the actual affidavit. Besides going through the Shoshona DARKE narrative, we're also going to go through the summary. So the way that the affidavit sort of summarizes the whole story, they sort of highlight what they think is important. We're going to do the same thing. Timmy, do you want to jump up or not? Timmy, do you want to jump up? Timmy, do you want to come? Do you want to be down there, or do you want to come up here? Often if I ignore him, then he will do something. So let's see what happens. Let's count to 3. 1, 2. Timmy, don't let me down. 3. I'm not going to pay attention to Timmy. I'm not going to pay attention to him. Let's see if he jumps up. He's jumping up against my leg, but I want him to jump up onto... Timmy, I'm not going to pay attention to you. Timmy, come up. Okay, well, let me just continue ignoring, while I'm ignoring him, see what you guys are saying. Robbie Robin, good to see you. Use bacon. I actually just want him to do his thing. He keeps jumping up against my leg. Timmy is playing hard to get. Timmy, come, jump up. Come on. Come on, Timmy. You can do it. Just jump up. Jump up. Come. Jump up. Come, boy. Come. Jump up. Jump up. This is where he is. He's just sort of trying to decide what to do. Timmy, come, jump up. Jump up. Come. Come, boy. Let's give him a moment. So I'm really quite confused. I thought I got a fractured rib, and I feel a lot better today. When I walked Timmy, I was actually able to. I went to sort of this area where my push-up bar is, or my pull-up bar. And I think I pulled myself about that eye off the ground, just gradually. And I really don't know if one could do that with a properly fractured rib. I went swimming this evening, not very long, just for about 15 minutes, just swam very slowly. I also don't know whether one could do that with a fractured rib. So I'm not really sure. Maybe it's a bruised rib. I just find it a bit unlikely that I would have recovered this quickly if it's actually fractured. Stephanie says it definitely looked cracked in the X-ray. I did actually phone the doctor. I've asked the doctor by secretary to send me another image that sort of zoomed in. We'll see if that happened. I was actually quite upset with the secretary because she was sort of arguing with me, just saying, no, we'll send you just the CD. And I saw all of the images. I saw all the images, and not only in the radiography room, but also in the I went back to the doctor. So, I don't want to see the generic images. I want to see the exact zoomed in area kind of thing. My impression is the injury is in my upper chest. But I would just like to see it, would like kind of certainty about it. And his secretary actually argued with me saying, no, we'll just send you the CD. And it's like, you are the secretary, you're not the doctor. and I'm the patient, I'm paying for the treatment. I sat there for quite a few hours waiting for the x-rays. So yeah, I don't know whether she's even going to convey the message that I wanted to give to the doctor to him. So anyway, we'll see. Anyway, it does seem like quite good news that, I mean, I don't want to be out of action for 6 weeks. I'm thinking of getting on an exercise bike tomorrow and just not pedaling hard, but kind of getting going. So we'll see how that goes. You can burst. You mean burst a rib? When I swam, I did feel a little bit of. I mean, I can't breathe. There's a little bit of constricted breathing going on, which I think is from inflammation. But I really don't think one could literally lift yourself off the ground like that if you had rib damage. Also, getting into my car, getting into the car where you shift to the left and shift to the right, definitely was a lot easier today than it's been on the other days. I still don't think I can sleep on the side where it's damaged. What is the other thing? Something that I think is crazy about the whole thing is I don't have any bruising, like whatsoever. So I've got a lot of skin scraped off my elbow, but there's literally nowhere on my body where there's sort of bruising. There's no blue marks. There's sort of no sensitive skin. I really don't understand that. I think I must have fallen on my arm and sort of on that side, and somehow, I don't know, my arm cushioned against my body. I don't really know exactly what happened. But yeah, it's certainly better than I guess it could have been. Gravel rash. Dorothy says hi from Colorado. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously bruising inside, but it's just weird that there's not any blue anywhere. Not on my arm, not on my leg, not on my chest, nowhere. No, I didn't have concussion. I think I've kind of bounced on my arm, which is sort of like that. But the fact that I didn't bruise it is for me very strange. I did have my helmet on. Okay, so what we're going to deal with here is almost the last pages of the affidavit. We're going to page 123 of the affidavit, and it deals with a woman called Shoshona DARKE. DARKE spelled D-A-R-K-E. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, there was this discussion amongst law enforcement whether or not to act against Barry, and some felt it was premature to act against him in December, right? And so the fact that this particular information came through not only in December, but up until February 2021, just shows, I guess, the wisdom of waiting, right? I think that this particular twist in the tale it's not like it changes everything, but I think it adds a dimension to the story that puts a kind of a different shade over the whole thing, right? So, and what I kind of mean is it's sort of a story about Suzanne Morphew not quite being the woman that a lot of people thought she was, blah, blah, blah. That is sort of Barry's version. And then right at the end, you actually see that Barry, I don't want to say has a secret life, but there's certainly a different side to Barry than even investigators knew about, right? Obviously, you could say it's different. Barry's relationship with Shoshona appears to occur after Suzanne's disappearance, right? So there's that aspect as well. But nevertheless, it adds a very interesting dimension. And the way that I think what's very interesting about this is the way that the authorities came to find out about this, right? I think that is definitely sort of quite interesting. I don't know if you guys remember some of the descriptions witnesses gave saying that Barry's quite a secretive fellow. What does that actually mean? Secretive about what, right? And so this, again, maybe addresses that aspect. Let's just look at some of your comments here. Al Anders claims it's a platonic relationship. Shoshona Dark also claims it's a platonic relationship. I think one's got to sort of ask the question, how often have you given or received flowers on Valentine's Day and gone to a hotel and it's platonic? I think one's got to bear that part in mind as well. But that is the response of both, I think, Barry and Shoshona Dark is, oh, no, it's just a superficial platonic relationship. So I think in a way you have some things presented in the Morphew case, right, that pretend to be a certain way. For example, the bicycle. And you, in a way, have got to look at that and, in a way, draw your own conclusion. So, in other words, the bicycle is suggesting, for example, Suzanne Morphew went for a ride. But did she? When you have Barry taking this woman to a hotel, and it's kind of on Valentine's Day, and he says, well, it's actually just superficial. We're going to a hotel on Valentine's Day. It's just a superficial thing. What is the reality kind of thing? And I think you get to that reality in part by getting to know who these people are. In other words, if you go beyond the superficial, if you get to know the affidavit quite well, if you get to know the statements quite well, if you get to know where certain things are said that just don't wash, then you're going to get a better sense. Somebody, and I kind of understand it because I've been in the same position. You see someone has done a live and they're going to address certain things, and you feel like, well, I don't have 3 hours to go through this live to figure out what this is about. And someone was saying, can you just summarize what you were saying in 10 minutes? In terms of the affidavit and in terms of dealing with these statements, you really don't want to sort of reduce it to like a cardboard cutout. You really do need to go, you've got to pay the price of paying attention and taking quite a long time to absorb the version a particular person gives of themselves, and then also the versions other people give of those events. You can't really take a shortcut around that. Anyway, so let's go to the affidavit. It says, on December 16, 2020, Sheffield County Sheriff's Office Deputy Miles Jones, that's someone we haven't really heard from before, received a tip from a person who requested to remain anonymous. Now, I don't really know what that means. I don't know if it means someone sort of literally bumped into them in the street or whether someone phoned the tip in. It's not really clarified here. But anyway, so a tip came in and this person was obviously a female, and she reported that her friend, so it's apparently a friend of Shoshona's, said that Shoshona is intimately involved in a relationship with Barry. So it seems like one of Shoshona's friends, am I saying it right? This is Shoshona. Shoshona. Am I saying it right? Like Shoshona or Shoshona. So anyway, this friend basically says, my friend is intimately involved in a relationship with Barry. Not involved in a relationship or in a friendship, but basically intimately involved, right? Then the very next day, December 17, Sergeant, I've got no idea how to say it, is it Sergeant Hayes Julian and Agent Cale? So Agent Cale is that officer who was what's the word? I guess internally investigated and who's no longer part of the case. So the sergeant and Agent Cale interviewed DARKE at the at the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office. She said she had known Barry since October 2020. So that's quite important to sort of jot down that her version, Shoshona's version, is that she knew Barry since October 2020, right? And what I find quite interesting is just if you, in your mind, say, okay, on paper, could this be the sort of woman that Barry would be interested in or attracted to? Maybe he isn't, but if it is, then it is someone who cleaned his neighbor's house, right? And so it's how can I put it? So let me just keep going. And then they apparently met one another at a dumpster. So how they actually met one another was apparently at a dumpster by chance. And that is actually Shoshona's version of how they met, which I don't know, I find quite, it's kind of a bleak irony, given, Barry and this lady meet at a dumpster, and in the circumstances of, Barry's wife, what happened to her, and on the day that she disappeared, Barry seemed to go to, I think, several dumpsters and trash bins and all that kind of thing. I don't know, it just seems such a strangely macabre, not coincidence, but kind of an irony, you know what I mean? And so, and she seems, I'm not sure what she does for a living, but she seems to clean houses. That seems to be part of what she perhaps does. Anyway, so she denies being in a romantic or sexual relationship with Barry. And then you have Shoshona deleting items on her phone. One of these items deleted was possibly a second phone number for Barry. Remember, there was talk of Barry maybe using a second device, right? And the crazy part in the affidavit is that this apparently happened in front of investigators. So it almost seems like, if I understand this correctly, Shoshona is, I guess, summoned to the police station. She goes there while she's being questioned, or while she's in that area, in the building, I guess, because it says she deleted items on her phone in front of investigators, and then they also say that she was evasive in answering questions. So, if you weren't in a romantic relationship, then why do you need to delete anything off your phone? And why do you need to be evasive? So there seems to be some suspicion based on law enforcement. I think that's why they included in the affidavit around their, what do you call it, their interaction. They seemed a bit concerned about what was going on. Now, let's bear in mind, Nicole Kessinger did something similar. She didn't delete anything on her phone in front of investigators, but she acknowledged that she had. She acknowledged that she'd also Googled, I think, how to, get data off your phone. But the difference is Nicole Kessinger seemed to do it in advance. Shoshona seemed to do it right there, kind of brazenly. I don't know how they know that she was doing it. I mean, were they looking at her phone? Was she kind of actively, very quickly doing it? How did they know for sure that she was deleting things related to Barry? Anyway, it says here that Shoshona called the CBI tip line in May 2020 to report strange vehicles being in the area around Puma Path around the time Suzanne disappeared. Now, they don't give the exact date. They say May 2020, we know Suzanne disappeared 10th May, so we don't know whether she phoned the next day or whatever. But just consider the fact that she says she'd known Barry since October 2020, but she called the tip line in May 2020. So you've got to kind of put those side by side and consider that, right? The other thing to consider is the import of what she's actually saying. So she calls the tip line to say, I thought I saw strange vehicles around Puma Path around the time Suzanne disappeared. Now, let me ask you, do you think that, how can I put it? Let me ask this question like this. Do you think there were strange vehicles around Puma Path, I guess around the Morphew home? Do you think there were strange vehicles around the Morphew home around the time Suzanne disappeared? Let's see what you guys say. Jean, thanks for that. Gid says no. Kelly Crawford says, if you're innocent, you answer questions. Stephanie says yes. Stephanie says she thinks there were strange vehicles in the area, I think. Sharon Butler says no. Susie, no. Faticus, no. Tricia says only FBI or cop vehicles. Seashore Girl says no. Robbie Robbins says maybe a new Bobcat. Chantal Lapini says no. Oh, Christine is here as well. Good to see you. Catherine McClure, hi from California. Margaret Zabinski says no. Paige Davis says she's literally putting herself in the area. Yvonne Phillips says doubtful. Production Profile says no. So it's obviously to Barry's advantage in this scenario for someone to come forward and say, guess what, I actually saw strange vehicles driving around. Now, I don't really know exactly what that means. I don't know whether she means, like on the evening of May 10th. She may not know the exact details. I don't know when she actually called this in, but, obviously if she called it in, let's say very early, she may not have known that Suzanne disappeared very early on May 10th. So she may have thought that she disappeared in the evening of May 10th or something like that. And the vehicle she saw may have been, people that were family members and whatever. But one would imagine you wouldn't call to report that if you're also seeing police vehicles. You wouldn't be calling to say, if there's a police vehicle, you wouldn't say, oh, I actually saw a strange vehicle there. At the same time, you wouldn't do that. one's just wondering if there's kind of an innocent explanation, if it was an innocent error. But the other side is, obviously, it favors Barry if there's somebody saying, I saw something strange going on. In other words, I saw strangers at the residence of the Morphew home. I saw strange vehicles. That then can sort of line up with the three supposed individuals who opened or left DNA on Suzanne Morphew's dashboard, and then also the supposed DNA on the bicycle. You can sort of link that up almost three ways now. You can say, well, Shoshona DARKE, does it say she saw or she heard? It just says she reported strange vehicles being in the area, right? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if what she saw did. She also says strange vehicles, plural. So how many were there? And so that's quite interesting. It's quite interesting that she doesn't seem to have a very strong connection to Barry. So she denies she's romantically connected to him. She denies the sexual relationship. She says she only knew him since October. And it's important to know for how long she has actually known him. It's important to know the true nature of their relationship. Are they very close? How long has this been the case? In order to know how to deal with this report, this tip, how much veracity to give this tip. The other thing that I think is worth considering is, again, I don't know exactly what she does for a living, but just based on what is provided here, that she cleaned a neighbor's house. She was cleaning neighbors' houses in October. You can imagine someone who's worth $2.5 million is probably going to be quite an attractive prospect for a housekeeper in a way. You know what I mean? It's someone, wow, this guy's a rich bachelor or whatever, a rich widower, as opposed to if she was some sort of executive who was kind of a self-made woman in a way. So that sort of definitely adds an element of intrigue. One wonders, is she saying this? Is she saying this? How can I put it? Did she legitimately see something and then she met Barry, blah, blah, blah? Or is there some sort of intrigue going on, you know? And it just seems a little bit, it's a bit unfortunate that the authorities just seem to have no idea about this until December. And one wonders, were they spying on Barry, or were they just only sort of talking to Barry when Barry came to talk to them? So in other words, was there any kind of surveillance of Barry? Was there anyone kind of watching his movements, or did they basically just rely on Barry coming forward when it suited them, and then that is when they got the information? Something else that would be interesting is, as far as I know, you know, did they ever ask Barry after Suzanne disappeared, have you met anyone? It would be interesting to know if they asked that question. I mean, I know he denied having affairs during his marriage, but it would be interesting to know after Suzanne disappeared if they sort of said, you know, do you have any friends? Do you have any female friends? Who are your female friends? How he responded to that. Anyway, coming back to the affidavit, this is the bottom of page 123. It says that Shoshona DARKE said in the December interview that she didn't know Suzanne and she said Suzanne is my age, and that a lot of people said I resemble her. And again, you've got this weird kind of mirror where some people said the same thing about Nicole Kessinger, that Nicole Kessinger was basically similar looking to Shanann Watts, a brunette, I guess, just in a really basic sense. But I think it's also quite weird that she would say this, that a lot of people say I resemble her. It would be interesting to know sort of where does that come from. And it may also be a case where she may be quite flattered by that idea that that she may see Barry in a certain way. He's got a big house. If you think about it, she perhaps cleans homes for a living. I don't know if she just cleaned one home or if she cleans many homes. But you can imagine looking at Barry's home from the outside thinking, wow, these are really wealthy people, and I look like this guy's missing wife. And then it's kind of a strange scenario if you think about it like that. I think the other reason that they mention, whether she knew Suzanne or not, is you can have a kind of a, how can I put it? I'm talking about from law enforcement's perspective. You might say, okay, so our possible suspects here are A, B, C, and D. And so one of these possibilities is, say, Jeff Libler. Jeff Libler might have a motive to, what's the word, to steal Suzanne away from the situation that she was in, to remove her from the situation that she was in. But then he's got an alibi, and for whatever reason, he's excluded as a suspect. But then you might say, what if there's a woman who liked Barry, who really liked Barry, who liked him obsessively? There was a woman who liked Barry, and she wanted Barry, right? Then they might want to know, did you know Suzanne? Did you encounter her? Blah, 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 blah. In other words, could there be a kind of a dark motive going on there? I don't think that's the case, but I think that is why they wanted to know, why they wanted to clarify, did you know Suzanne or not? But that is definitely a question that is raised here, is when exactly did Shoshona Darke enter this equation? And there is a little bit of murkiness. She says she's known him since October 2020. And what does it say here? So now we're on page 124. From December 2020 through April 2021, numerous Salida residents have reported that Darke is in a relationship with Barry. I don't know what actual value that has in the courtroom. I really don't know what value that has. If you say, well, the numerous Salida residents, okay, well, who are they? And so let's say you can kind of round them up. Let's say you find, okay, that person said it, that person said it. And let's say you've got half a dozen people, and you say, well, how do you know that she's in a relationship? Oh, well, I saw his vehicle go to her home, or I saw her vehicle go to his home. That's not really proof. She may have cleaned his home, or he may have. So one wonders really what is the actual probative value of what seems to be rumors here. It's also very late in the day. So what if it's true? If from December 2020 to April 2021, if people have seen him in a relationship, so what? I mean, this is almost a year after the fact. Does it really mean anything? And I suppose you could argue if if it's true, if what these residents are saying or what they're reporting, then you've also kind of got to say, why are they saying there's a relationship and Shoshona is saying there isn't, right? And then this is where it gets quite interesting. Their relationship is reported to date back to July 2020. That's in the affidavit. So they say Barry's relationship with Shoshona is reported, I guess, by these residents to date back to July 2020. Now, if you take that, it's getting you quite close to Suzanne's disappearance. It's getting you to almost within 2 months of her disappearance, right? And then it also contrasts with what she says, that I've known Barry since October 2020. So, there's quite a big difference between July, August, September, October. It's 3 or 4 months. So again, you get this weird sense of shifting reality. What is actually true here? Are the Salida residents imagining things? Are they exaggerating? Are they biased in some way? Or is this lady not being completely forthcoming? And then even if you know the truth one way or another, does that really change anything? Does it really matter if Barry met someone after his wife went missing? Right? Does it really matter if, if he met someone after his wife went missing? What difference does that really make? Al Anders, thanks a lot for that. I do think one's got to sort of read between the lines here and say, if she says their relationship was platonic and superficial and not romantic and not sexual, and they met in October, but there's this sort of rumor that they actually met in July 2020, then I think there's certainly the possibility, I think one's got to consider the possibility that if the residents somehow became wise to the fact or seemed to know that this relationship was actually happening in July, that maybe it's possible that it was actually happening before that and they didn't know about it, right? Do you get what I'm saying? In other words, she says October, the residents say 3 or 4 months earlier, July. Well, could it not possibly be slightly earlier than that? And irrespective of how early it was, it does seem if Barry took her to a hotel on Valentine's Day, it seems like it's quite a serious relationship. It's not like, you like somebody, and in terms of if you take someone to a hotel on Valentine's Day, it's quite something, and give them flowers. It seems to be a kind of a declaration of, I'm quite serious about you. The other thing to stress is that it says here, investigators have not confirmed that when their relationship started. So there's a bit of mystery surrounding this. And then this part is certainly quite interesting. It says a poll camera installed by the FBI has captured Barry's truck consistently coming and going from Shoshona Darke's residence, often between 9 o'clock at night and 11 o'clock at night, sometimes staying through the night. What I don't like about that particular statement is how vague it is. To say consistently coming and going, okay, when? Is it once a day? Is it like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Or is it once a week? It's not really giving you a strong sense of what that actually means. It does seem to be frequently, but I think saying that he sometimes stays through the night, I interpret that to mean he stays, he goes there at night, stays there and leaves the next morning. If that's the case, then I think it's a little bit harder to accept that it's not a very serious relationship, or it's like a platonic relationship. So she says it's not romantic and it's not sexual. And it may not be. Maybe they have conversations about, how to move on from trauma or whatever. Maybe they have some kind of, relationship based on being supportive to one another. But I think if you know Barry, if you know the kind of guy Barry is, Barry goes to gym, Barry, according to the search terms that they found on his phone, which may or may not be Barry's doing, who knows. But based on our sense of Barry, based on how he described his sexual life with his wife and his sexual needs, I guess, one wonders, and we asked the question earlier, is Barry a deep guy or is he a superficial guy? Is Barry a complicated guy or is he quite a simple guy? And so what is going on here is what's going on here, Barry kind of getting some kind of psychology like boost, someone who's like a shoulder to cry on. Is Barry the kind of guy you can imagine that goes to someone and they just talk? Or do you think it is more carnal than that? And again, I think you've got to have a sense of what kind of person Barry is. He's a hunter. He also has a certain relationship with men and with women. With men, he's a masculine sort of guy. He's a tough guy. What is his relationship like with women? And I don't know if we've got a large enough sample to say one way or the other, but certainly what Carrie, can't remember her surname, but what the massage therapist said was she said she felt quite uncomfortable. I don't know if that's enough of a sample to say, that other women felt like Barry was paying undue attention to them. There's also Holly who said that I think he claimed that he accidentally touched her breasts and said this and that and that. So even if that's two women, is that a large enough sample? So one's kind of got to make up your mind based on enough people and based on your own, not just intelligence, but based on knowing the story intimately, that you know what kind of person this person is. And so based on that, what is likely in terms of this mysterious relationship? What is more likely than not? The problem is, even if you transfer that over, how does that really materially impact the circumstances of this case? Where does it really take you? Does it have any probative value? And I think I don't know if there's really much more one can use with this particular stuff, with this particular information, than to say maybe Barry's quite discreet in his affairs, or in his affairs is maybe the wrong word, in his relationships or friendships or whatever you want to call it. Does that take you anywhere, kind of thing? So it says that their relationship is reported to date back to July 20. Has captured Barry's truck consistently coming and going from the dark residence, often between 9 and 11 p.m., sometimes staying through the night. One also wonders whether Barry's daughters would be aware of this. Would they know Barry has this friend? Would they know what kind of friendship he has with this friend. And then the final aspect here, it says CBI agents Graham and Cahill confirmed that Darke and Barry checked into the Antlers Hotel in Colorado Springs on February 12, 2021, and checked out on Valentine's Day as captured on surveillance footage below, with Barry carrying Darke's luggage and Darke holding a bouquet of flowers. Barry's cell phone was either off or in airplane mode during the majority of this trip. And all of that's also quite interesting. Now, in the same way that I find it just kind of macabre, sort of macabrely ironic, is you have this weird parallel of apparently Barry meeting Shoshona at a dumpster. So you can almost imagine, do they have this romantic encounter where they meet and the stars align or something at this dumpster? But in any event, they meet at this dumpster, and then we know how dumpsters play a role in the fabric of this case. In the same way, on the day that Suzanne goes missing, Barry goes to a Holiday Inn, and there's chlorine and documents and all sorts of strange things going on there. And then you have this parallel to Barry carrying this other woman's luggage and giving her flowers and having this romantic meeting on Valentine's Day. And the only way that this is captured was thanks to the FBI putting up a poll camera. Otherwise, would you have been able to capture it? Would you have known for sure about this happening? Excuse me, I think the poll camera is placed sort of by her residence. I think the surveillance footage comes probably from the Antlers Hotel, what do you call it, their own internal systems. I just find those parallel circumstances kind of sickening in a way. I just find it quite... Fatika says, why did the FBI put the camera up? Well, I think the reason is so that they don't actually have to be sort of staking out. They don't actually have to be sitting there all night, so you can kind of have the camera, then you can record, everything, and then you can fast forward, okay, this is when he arrives, this is when he leaves, right? And it's obviously not just one day, we've got no idea how many. So, no, that's the situation. The Humble Grower, welcome to the TCRS Transit Lounge. Heather Campbell says, stars align on meeting at a dumpster. Yeah, that's exactly my point. The other thing that I just find bizarre is if Barry's innocent, how can I put this? It's kind of a situation where Barry's being, I guess, investigated and is dealing with the disappearance of his wife. In the middle of that, someone seems to be finding him attractive. Or I guess that's the question. Is someone finding him attractive? If you imagine it with Chris Watts, can you imagine if Chris Watts got away with what he did, meaning his wife and children disappeared, and let's say Nicole Kessinger dropped him like a hot potato, but he still got away with it. And then like 3 months later, someone met Chris Watts in the middle of, where's your wife and kids? But wow, I think you're really attractive. Do you want to go out on a date? But don't worry, we're not really going to talk about that aspect. I'm sure it's fine, kind of thing. It just sort of makes you wonder, where's the critical thinking in this story? It also makes you wonder what what conversations went on. How do you explain all of this taking place? Like what? It would be interesting to know what Barry said to Shoshona Darke about his wife. Did she ask much about her? And if she did, what did he say? Did he say, I think she ran off, or I think a mountain lion got her? And do you think Shoshona accepted that? Like, yeah, I think a mountain lion, it must have been a mountain lion. So I think I'm okay to, I don't know, that aspect is also for me quite troubling. The other cases, well, I'm not really going to name them all, but where you have people involved in very high-profile cases, and then people find them really attractive. I mean, Casey Anthony, Amanda Knox, and so on. It doesn't really. It's almost like I really don't care what the background is to your story. I think you're cool. And I guess in a way you could say that's very gracious of someone who's romantically linked. But yeah, I don't know whether to say much more about that. Yvonne Phillips says critical thinking is not on the minds of a lot of people these days. Mel Stiller says maybe Barry gave Shoshona the kidnap scenario. Maybe that's why she either thought or she imagined the cars being in that area. Okay, and so that's the sort of intriguing twist right at the end of the whole thing. Now I have to say, if I was the prosecutor, I think I would start my story. I would, if they talk about the heads of argument, as we say, first of all, Barry's innocent until proven guilty, but also we don't even know if this case is going to trial. But if the case is going to trial, and I was the prosecutor, I would start my narrative with the Shoshona Darke thing, meaning I would just say basically what's in the affidavit. And even if it comes across as neither here nor there, in other words, even if you just sort of say, on Valentine's Day, Barry was with this lady at this hotel and he gave her flowers, and you say nothing more than that. You don't have to say that it's strange or odd or romantic or anything. You simply just say, this is what we know. We know that Barry was with this lady, right? And then you tell your story. And then at the end of your story, you come back to the same thing. And I think the reason you want to do that is plant in the mind of the juror the question of, do we know what's actually going on with Barry? And it's quite an authentic question, because you might say, okay, so Barry's wife's cheating on him. Barry's allowed to have a girlfriend. And so Barry's secret life is he eventually meets another woman, and so what? So all I'm trying to say is you can have a juror thinking, okay, so that's the prosecution's case, and I don't see anything wrong with it. He, his wife was unfaithful, and he later met someone else, and good for him, right? On the other hand, you could have a juror thinking about the way that the Morphews present themselves. I'm talking about Barry and Suzanne, presenting themselves as very God-fearing people, as very honest people, as very pious sort of people, and kind of through that the sense of, my word is my bond, my word is strong as oak. What I say is true, what I say is honest. And then, well, why is there sort of another dimension that seems to be either hidden or secretive? And then does that mean anything, kind of thing? So I'm just saying, I think it would be quite interesting to put the ball in the court of the juror to say, remember what I said in the previous live stream? I said, Juan Martinez, the guy who prosecuted the Jodi Arias case, said there are often sort of three motives. It's either money or it's sex and money, right? And so you kind of want to almost test that, use that test here to say, could that be applicable, right? And then you provide some of the substance to that. It's very hard to know whether the affidavit is a skeleton version of them knowing a heck of a lot more, or whether they've really given everything that they really have on Barry in the affidavit. It's hard to know how much they're actually holding back. Lady M, welcome to the VIP lounge. L. Anders says the prosecution is killing us. Patty says, okay. Shoal says, test the theory, apply that to the situation. Stephanie says, why would the prosecution not want a canine to testify? Am I missing something? Sarah Glenn says, okay. Just want to see some of your comments here. Sarah Glenn says the prosecution wanted a canine handler to not testify in trial after learning today he made a report but didn't disclose. Really, was that today? Are you talking about the Morphew case? If so, can you put a link to that? Because I did Google the Morphew case today. I didn't see any recent news. The Humble Grower says, I love a mystery. Did Barry pay back the money he owed his father-in-law? As far as I know, he did. And as far as I know, I could be wrong, as far as I know, he paid it something like 2 or 3 months before Suzanne disappeared. But there did seem to be money did seem to be a big issue in her notes. That definitely came up. Al Anders says 3 cadaver dogs detected something at 3 separate times. I'm aware of 2 times. I'm not sure about the third one. Stephanie says, Sarah Glenn says, a judge rules a veterinarian expected to testify about the tranquilizer material, how it affects animals, won't be allowed to testify as an expert. As far as I know, that means the veterinarian can testify, but it's not going to be regarded as expert testimony. I'm not sure if it's really that important, that distinction. It doesn't mean that they can't testify, just that it's not regarded as sort of gospel kind of thing. Lady M says, thanks for the lovely welcome. Sarah Glenn says, yes, that's how I read it. Teresa says, no dog hit at the bike scene according to the court today. That is quite important. Mel Stiller says, if there's a trial, I think the lack of clarity in the affidavit will be remedied when the police officers involved are put in the stand. Sarah Glenn says, is the canine a cadaver dog? No, it's not putting a dog on the stand. It's putting I think the canine handler on the stand. Paige says, we are applying logic. What if some of the people in this were addicts? I think that's quite an interesting avenue. I definitely think that's quite an interesting avenue because it would explain a certain amount of compulsive and devious behavior and secretive behavior. And for me, it seemed to be a little bit, what's the word? It seemed odd the way Barry kept insisting that his wife was a drug addict or that she was using chemicals. It comes up quite a lot, and so one wonders why that's the case. On the one hand, you could say it's because she was getting medical treatment, but it could also be because there are certain kinds of drugs that are part of the story. Who knows? Okay, so I'm now going to read the summary that's provided in the affidavit. It says, Suzanne Morphew is missing and presumed dead per all nationwide checks, investigative leads, and the absence of interactions with Jeff Libler, Sheila Oliver, and I think the next part is redacted, but I reckon that's a reference to Suzanne's children. Once redacted left the Morphew house, I think that may also be a reference to the daughters. On May 5th, 2020, Suzanne began to take her steps to leave Barry while Barry took steps to control her, incapacitate her, stage a crime scene, and create his alibi for her disappearance. So that's kind of how they open it. I do think it's a strong case. I've said this before that you may think as a suspect in a case like this or as a defense lawyer, you may think, well, no body, no crime. I think it's the opposite. I think if you say the person, how can I put it? Here's a guy sitting in court, and the person closest to that guy, also the person who saw her last, what is your explanation for the fact that this particular person has disappeared into thin air, just vanished without a trace? What's your story? Why did that happen? And before you answer the question, just a couple of things. On the day that she disappeared, you seem to behave a little bit strangely. You did all of these trash runs. You drove in a somewhat erratic fashion, and you were running around your own home based on the metadata in a way that seems a bit odd. And then also that you were having arguments pretty toxic and tense arguments about divorce and so on right at the time that she disappeared. And then there's also these financial issues. Okay, now let's hear your story, right? You know what I'm saying? So this whole idea that no body, no crime, if you don't find a body, well, don't look at me. There could be 100 explanations, could be a mountain lion, could be an abduction. Well, if it was a mountain lion, you'd expect some kind of evidence trail. You'd expect something like a blood trail. You'd expect that the carcass would be left over. And to me, one of the most absurd things Barry said was something about a mountain lion eating a person whole, like eating everything. It doesn't happen. Simply doesn't happen. And a good analogy to that is Brian Laundrie. Brian Laundrie's remains were in the wild for a month, and they nevertheless recovered his remains, right? They recovered his skull and almost all the bones of his skeleton. A body doesn't just get sort of absorbed by nature like that, and this is a case where it's a sort of mountain terrain. There's not water. That's also a factor, and the kind of decomposition speed you have in Florida. But the point is, you don't have everything just disappearing just like that. So you've got to take the strange circumstances of disappearance and say, have you got a good explanation for where you were, what you were doing, and kind of what happened? And of course, the mountain lion explanation doesn't work. The abduction story has some support, I guess. Anyway, so this is let me just read this from the affidavit. Suzanne, on May 5th, 2020, Suzanne began to take steps to leave Barry, while Barry took steps to control her, incapacitate her, stage a crime scene, and create his alibi for her disappearance. They're not necessarily specific about what the steps were to control her. I don't know whether that includes hacking into her Facebook, setting up cameras. I don't quite know what they are specifically referring to in terms of that. Anyway, it goes on to say, no hike existed that Saturday afternoon in Barry's multiple interviews with CBI until a June interview when he said they hiked to Fooses Lake. CBI allowed him to assert that a few times until they refuted the hike in his July interview. Barry was told that he was driving in Salida that afternoon, asking Tim Bacco to purchase a backhoe attachment for his Bobcat. Finally, Barry put his phone in airplane mode that Saturday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. after he returned home and ran around his house at 2:44 p.m. So if you just put that into perspective, they're saying that he returned home, ran around his house at 2:44 p.m. and then, so after running around his house, then he put his phone in airplane mode. He claimed to CBI that he and Suzanne ate steaks, though he cannot describe them, and that he washed redacted sheets, though redacted said the bed was made when she left, that they had sex, though he could not describe what happened following the sex, that he woke to his alarm at 4:30 a.m., though no alarm was set on his phone, and his phone and his truck telematics were moving in the 3 a.m. hour, and that he had to suddenly leave for a job in Broomfield, though he did not tell his co-workers he was leaving that morning. All of that is quite compelling. It's quite interesting that they know that his alarm wasn't set on his phone. I don't quite know how they know that. I didn't know that your phone can, reflect that an alarm was set or not, but apparently it can. So I think he said he woke his alarm at 4:30 a.m. and they found that no alarm was actually set on his phone. So one of the problems I think Barry is going to have, or could have if this case goes to court, is that there's going to have to be some explanation for many inconsistencies in his many statements. If you're innocent, surely you would have had one consistent version throughout. Why are there lots of little problems here and there? And why does there seem to be some tailoring of his statement? It says, Barry initially blamed a mountain lion for Suzanne's death upon being notified of her bicycle recovery. In 2021, Barry blamed the turkeys for why he did not have veggie soup with Suzanne during lunch on Saturday, May 9th. The deer for why his tranquilizer gun was used to explain the needle sheath recovered in the dryer, and a chipmunk for why he was running around his house after arriving home at 2:44 p.m., and the firing of a gun of a .22 caliber to describe his violence towards Suzanne that afternoon, and the caliber of the tranquilizer darts. I have previously brought up the fact that three different sort of animals are used, perhaps anthropomorphically, potentially in the place of Suzanne. And these are a turkey or turkeys, deer, and a chipmunk. And then you also have this idea of a mountain lion being the perpetrator. So it's almost like if you imagine Suzanne as a turkey and then a mountain lion comes along, or you imagine Suzanne as a chipmunk and a mountain lion comes along, or you imagine Suzanne as a deer and a mountain lion comes along. It just seems to be how can I put it? It's possibly a symbolic construct that's worth considering. On the other hand, it could be that Barry, on the same day, ran after turkeys, a chipmunk, and deer, all kind of on the same day. For his trip on May 10th, Barry explained his left turn on Highway 50 to explain the truck movement because of a bull elk sighting at 4:30 a.m. from 2 miles down the road, a left turn that placed him at the scene of Suzanne's helmet. Barry cannot provide a last sighting of Suzanne, only labored breathing similar to a snore, which is consistent with her being tranquilized. I think that is very well stated in the affidavit. What they're actually saying there is that Barry has not been able to say, just think about this in a general terms. Barry can't actually say what the last thing is that he saw of Suzanne. So, he's asked, Barry, what was the last, when you saw Suzanne the last time, what did you see? Barry hasn't seemed to be able to answer that question. All he's been able to say is, the last thing I remember was hearing something, and what I heard was labored breathing, almost like a snore. And what they are interpreting in this acknowledgement is that is a similar scenario. They say it's consistent with her being tranquilized. So they obviously feel Suzanne was tranquilized as part of what ultimately happened to her. They go on to say Barry describes her as being drunk that afternoon, which matches the effects of the tranquilizer after a few minutes. Also find that very, very astute in the sense that they're saying there may be some truth to this idea of Suzanne being drunk, meaning if you've been tranquilized, there's a point where you start stumbling around and you're like a person who's intoxicated, right? And so in a sense, there's a certain amount of truth in that scenario. And that's what the affidavit is emphasizing. He says, Barry describes Suzanne as being drunk that afternoon, which matches the effects of the tranquilizer after a few minutes. He says he's running around the house, most likely chasing Suzanne while she's conscious. Well, what he was actually saying is running around the house after a chipmunk. They saying actually was most likely chasing Suzanne while she was still conscious. Barry has admitted that he had taken Suzanne's phone from her at least twice in the past to try to monitor or control what she was doing. There is no phone activity for Suzanne after 2:30 p.m. on Saturday, which is out of the norm for her typical behavior, and an abrupt end following her 59 communications with Jeff Libler that morning and afternoon. That's certainly true. By around 2:30 p.m. on Saturday, May 9th, it had become clear that Barry could not control Suzanne's insistence on leaving him, and he resorted to something he has done his entire life: hunt and control Suzanne like he had hunted and controlled animals. This is pretty strong language in the affidavit. I'm going to read that again. By around 2:30 p.m. on Saturday, May 9th, it had become clear that Barry could not control Suzanne's insistence, this was Suzanne standing up for herself, on leaving him, and he resorted to something he had done his entire life: hunt and control Suzanne like he had hunted and controlled animals. Barry told investigators early on that he blamed alcohol for Suzanne's change of behavior and her distant unlovingness to him, though she was not a heavy drinker. Barry used alcohol, drugs, and chemo throughout his interviews to describe Suzanne's independence and distancing from him, saying it was every day that last week. Barry finally blamed God for Suzanne's death after being informed of the affair as a form of judgment on her, and has stated repeatedly that God allowed this to happen. Barry told the FBI and CBI numerous times no evidence exists, which infers he knows what happened to the evidence in this case. You may remember the same thing with Chris Watts saying, during the sermon on the porch, saying, he arrived home and there was nothing. And then he sort of explains himself and he says, I came home and there was nothing. Nobody was here. But by saying nothing, he's actually saying there was actually no evidence. And then he changes it to, well, nobody was here. It is quite interesting that they say, Barry's saying no evidence exists. They interpret that to mean he knows what happened to the evidence. So in other words, you're not going to find the evidence. When the Ritters called, this is really interesting, when the Ritters, that's the neighbors, called Barry at around 5 p.m. on Sunday to tell Barry they could not find Suzanne, Barry was in his hotel room and had been there since about 12:40 p.m. So Barry had been in his hotel room for 4 or 5 hours, and one wonders what he was doing. I think one of the things he could have been doing was simply sleeping. If Barry was awake kind of throughout the night, and it seems like he was already awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, then you can kind of imagine when he went to this hotel room, one of the things he needed to do, so you could say he went to Broomfield to do a job, to work on a job, to prepare for a job. But I suppose you could also say if he didn't get any sleep that night, would he not have just been in the hotel room sleeping because he had so little sleep? What else is he doing in the hotel room for 4 or 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours straight? It says, however, he should not be there per his alibi to be out of town for an emergency job in Broomfield. Barry told the Ritters he was at the job site. So as far as I understand this, when the Ritters called him, he was in his hotel room, but he told them he was actually at the job site. In other words, he was in Broomfield, not at the hotel, but actually on the location of the job site, sort of doing something. Instead, he wasn't actually there, he was actually in the hotel room. And again, you've kind of got to say, if Barry's innocent, why on earth would he say that, right? Why would it be necessary to embellish that part? So it says here, Barry told the Ritters he was at the job site. He told the FBI, CBI, and Chaffee County Sheriff's Office he was at the job site. So these are 4 different entities that he assured that he was at the job site. It was the FBI, CBI, Chaffee County Sheriff's Office, and the Ritters. He told all of them he was at the job site. And you kind of had the same thing with Chris Watts. Chris Watts, where were you? Well, I just went to work. Anyway, it says he left his room. He took tools out of his truck and put them in the lobby to make it look like he was returning from the site. That's also quite interesting. He took tools out of his truck, put them in the lobby to make it look like he was coming back from the site. Barry made very little attempt to contact Suzanne on his way home or look around his house or the bike scene because he already knew what happened to her. Setting the tools out that day was similar to what happened earlier that morning when Suzanne's bicycle was placed on the incline, as Deputy Brown commented. Deputy Brown said, I started to question if something criminal had occurred, as it looked like the bike was purposefully thrown in this location. You kind of had a situation where almost instantly, when presented with this bicycle, at least one of the officers said that he suspected foul play. So it's almost, if you imagine a situation where Barry is responsible and Barry went to a lot of trouble to do something and to cover it up. If you put that version out there, right? If you say, okay, this is the hypothesis, then you've got an officer who's saying, well, I was immediately not convinced of that. And the defense could say that's a rush to judgment. You immediately suspected Barry, you didn't give him a chance. Well, I guess the counter to that is, yes, but it took over a year, it took almost a year to actually arrest him. I mean, he was spoken to 15, 16 times. Is that a rush to judgment? That maybe they'll argue, but you suspected him the whole time. We'll see. Anyway, so Deputy Brown said, I started to question if something criminal had occurred because the bike looked like it was purposely thrown down in this location. And then it says, as of May 4, 2021, Suzanne Morphew has not been located. That's really how the affidavit ends. And, the fact is, as of the 31st of March, 2022, Suzanne Morphew has still not been located either. And actually, every day that goes by, it's not like no body, no crime. So the more time that goes by, the less evidence there is. Well, the more time that goes by, the more evidence she's not coming back. The more evidence that she is very likely deceased. And that is how the summary opens. It opens with Suzanne Morphew is missing and presumed dead, right? And so, as I say, every day that goes by, it may seem obvious, but every day that goes by, it's even more obvious that she's not coming back. There's only one case that turns that psychology around that I'm aware of. And that's the Madeleine McCann case, where you say the more time that goes by where you hear nothing, the more likely it is that she's okay. I guess, if you say so, I guess. I just want to, although I've read the ending of the affidavit, which I think is very well summarized. I think it's very cogent. I want to take us back to the beginning. I'm not going to read very far, but I want to take you back to the beginning because I want to juxtapose the beginning with the end, right? Suzanne took clear articulable steps, meaning she articulated what she was going to do. Suzanne took clear articulable steps in January 2020 in attempts to separate from and divorce her husband Barry. She told her family and close friends about her intentions. She secretly recorded her notes of abuse in her phone because Barry monitored it. She confronted Barry in arguments that she secretly recorded with the help from a friend, and finally sent him a text 4 days before she disappeared, saying that she was done and also saying, let's handle this civilly. Barry, however, initially represented to investigators from the CBI, the FBI, and the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office that his marriage with Suzanne was, quote, perfect, and she had no intention of leaving him. Barry's statements about his actions on the days before and after Suzanne's disappearance have been proven to be false and misleading by this investigation. Barry knowingly destroyed evidence that his relationship with Suzanne was deteriorating and that he was involved in her disappearance and homicide. Suzanne's bicycle and helmet were recovered close to the Morphew residence. That's also a really important point. The bicycle wasn't found 5 miles away or 10 miles away or like a long distance away. It was actually found really, really close by. It was discarded before Barry left town in the early morning hours of May 10, 2020. This is law enforcement's hypothesis. The investigation to date indicates that these items were not indicative of an accident, not indicative of an animal attack, not indicative of Suzanne being a runaway, not indicative of Suzanne committing suicide, and not indicative of Suzanne being the victim of a stranger abduction. All records checks available to the FBI and law enforcement indicate as of April 30, 2021, that Suzanne has not used a credit card, nor her social security number, nor has she been contacted by law enforcement, not flown in an airplane, not crossed a national border, not established utilities or housing, nor otherwise continued in her normal pattern of life for over 355 days. Well, now it is almost 2 years. Based upon legal supposition, Suzanne Morphew, based on this lack of proof of life, is deceased. Then they referred to case law in this respect. Within a month or so of Barry moving Suzanne and their daughter, I think it should be daughters, but anyway, and their daughter from Indiana to Colorado in April 2018. So it's quite interesting that Suzanne disappears almost on the anniversary of their move to Colorado. They moved to Colorado in April 2018. By May 2020, Suzanne's no longer in the picture. Suzanne sent a Facebook message of howdy stranger. So within a month of moving to Colorado, Suzanne was actually reaching out to Jeff Libler, which one wonders, was she already feeling lonely? Was she already feeling isolated? Was she already feeling disconnected? Was she already feeling some kind of intuition? Was she just feeling like, I don't know. It's just interesting that, anyway, Suzanne and Libler, who resides in Michigan, began communicating regularly through 2018 and eventually began meeting each other in 2019. Suzanne traveled to meet him in New Orleans, Indianapolis, Dallas, Michigan, and Florida, where they eventually had consensual sex. By September 2019, Barry took clear steps to determine if Suzanne was having an affair by stalking her at their own residence in Salida, Colorado, as witnessed by Suzanne's closest friend, Sheila Oliver. In January 2019, Barry took Suzanne's phone from her when they were in a resort in Mexico while she was talking to Libler, but he was unable to determine Libler's identity. That's also a big question, is did Barry determine Jeff Libler's identity? If so, when did he determine it? On May 8th, 2020, Suzanne saved in the notes section of her phone that Barry accused her of having a boyfriend on May 6th, 2020. On May 9, 2020, Suzanne's last proof of life occurred in the 2 p.m. hour, I think it's actually 2:03, when she was messaging Libler with a selfie while Barry returned to the residence. Suzanne did not respond to Libler's return messages at 2:44 p.m. and 2:46 p.m. The same time, Barry admitted to running around their property with a gun and placing his phone in airplane mode at 2:47 p.m. The computer activity or telematics from Barry's Ford F-350, the activity of his cell phone and statements he made to law enforcement in multiple interviews confirmed that from 2:47 p.m. on May 9, 2020 until 5:37 a.m. on May 10, 2020, he took steps to dispose of evidence of Suzanne's disappearance and death, create a false alibi for himself, and stage a crime scene. As per the affidavit, in recent months, following the presentation of evidence by FBI agents to Barry, he has changed critical details about his activities in the 2 p.m. hour on May 9th in attempts to match the evidence. In other words, they're saying in the many statements Barry gave, as they gave Barry more information about what they knew, Barry would then change his story to match what was known. Since January 2021, Barry has admitted to chasing a chipmunk with a gun around the house while Suzanne was outside sunbathing, shooting a deer with a tranquilizer dart to explain a dart or needle cap in the dryer, disposing of the tranquilizer solution during his trip to Broomfield. That to me is kind of unbelievable. According to this, Barry actually admitted to disposing of tranquilizer solution during his trip to Broomfield. Like, why on earth would you do that? You know, you might throw away trash. Why on earth would you want to dispose of tranquilizer solution on that day? He also says he followed a bull elk down Highway 50 in the 4 a.m. hour on May 10th to explain why his truck would be headed west, where the helmet was discarded, and finally stating to the FBI on April 22nd, 2021, that he looks guilty from the evidence and God allowed these things to happen. Let me just repeat that. So the affidavit is basically just repeating what Barry said, that Barry himself finally said to the FBI on April 22nd, 2021, it's almost a year ago now. Barry said that he looks guilty from the evidence and God allowed these things to happen. Barry's involvement in Suzanne's disappearance and death can be organized into the initial scene and interviews, that's section 1 of the affidavit, Suzanne's affair and her attempts to leave him, that's section 2, Barry's early statements to the to the CBI from May through June 2020, that's section 3, the evidence recovered by law enforcement, that's section 4 of the affidavit, witness statements, that's section 5 of the affidavit, and Barry's statements to the FBI in 2021, where he tangentially describes what happened to Suzanne when he's shown evidence in the case, and that's section 6. And we've sort of by hook or by crook kind of gone through all 6 of these sections of the affidavit in this series of live streams. So I hope you guys have found the analysis of it illuminating. I hope you found it helpful. I haven't done much more than sort of read the affidavit and then sort of elaborate a little bit on some of the points. The hard work was done by those who compiled this affidavit. And one wonders whether that work will lead to a conviction or not. One also wonders whether still we don't even know almost in April of 2022 if this case is definitely going to court or not, which to me is pretty shocking in itself. It's like Suzanne Morphew's has been missing for 2 years, and at the point we are right now, it's like, is this case trying to find out what happened to her? Is it actually going to trial? We're not actually sure. I find that I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I find it disgusting. Margaret Zabinski, thanks a lot for that. Yvonne Phillips says he admits that, I think he's saying from the evidence, from some of the evidence, he thinks some of it makes him look guilty. Maui Swift says there's a hearing today, so we may find out today what the situation is. Yeah, so there's an article right now, accused killer Barry Morphew in court. Several witnesses no longer able to testify against him. It just seems like one victory after another from the defense, doesn't it? Judge rules more witnesses can't testify as experts. As I understand it, they can't testify as experts, but they can nevertheless testify. So I'll just put some of these stories in here. And I must say, I mean, just looking at this particular article, you have the optics of Barry arriving at court wearing a suit. He's sort of well dressed. He looks neat, he's shaved, and he's flanked by two young women, his daughters. And so the optics certainly suggest, you know, if you're the people closest to you believe in you, love you, trust you, who are we to doubt you? That's certainly what is the obvious impression to draw from that. And then again, I think one can ask, is critical thinking being applied here? What is actually happening here? What is reality? What is the reality here? Miss Silk says this is a multifaceted nightmare. Maui Swift says the vet can't be an expert. I don't really see anything wrong with that. I mean, I think if you want someone to talk expertly about something as specific and complicated as tranquilizer evidence, related evidence, maybe you need to speak to the manufacturer, or you need to speak to a chemist, or you need to speak to, I'm just trying to think what sort of a accepted expert in that field. Maybe a sort of a government appointed hunter who's required to tranquilize animals for zoos or for whatever. Maybe, would that person be regarded as an expert? I don't know. Isn't it just a simple question of just meet the right standard for that, That's a good point from Robbie Robin. She says, is it because the vet will not know the effects of the drug on humans, only animals? I mean, that's quite a good point. I don't know whether a vet would know that. That's quite a good point. So if you were legal counsel, what sort of juror do you think would be the sort of juror that you'd want in this case? First of all, would you want a male juror or a female juror? Second of all, what sort of age would you want your juror to be? And then what do you think would be an important third aspect? What do you think would be your, what's the word? Not checklist, but your, I don't know, just not thinking very well today. What would be your best, not options, what traits would you be looking for? Al Anders says female, middle-aged and older. I don't know why. Martin Smallwood says a chipmunk jury. Criteria, there we go. Thanks, Susan. Stephanie says female and married. Audrey says, I wonder if the bedroom. Do you think the religious, what do you call it, the beliefs of the jurors is going to matter? Two Dog Nights is young. Sarah Glenn says, I would want both. Both bring different perspectives. Men can see through other men. Sarah Adams says middle-aged. Tricia says a mix of female and male and single and married, aged mix 20 to 75. That's quite a wide. Al Anders says no religious fanatics. I would like to see at least one mountain biker amongst the group. I'd like to see someone who I guess rides mountain bikes fairly regularly, because one of the things that I thought was, I don't know whether it's an insight we came up with or if we sort of got the idea from the affidavit. I don't know if the affidavit's very explicit about this, but if Suzanne went mountain biking, why didn't she take a water bottle with her, right? I can tell you that it's virtually never ever happens that you'll go for a mountain bike ride or ride your bicycle anywhere, even if it's a short ride. You will always take your water bottle with you. It's just it's almost like taking a towel to the gym. It's actually even more common than that. So the fact that there's no water bottle just shows how absolutely obvious it is that was staged. Paige says men also project and protect other men instinctively, and or protect other men instinctively. Sharon says a veterinarian for a juror. That might be quite hard to find. Martin Smallwood says there was no bike ride. Yeah, I agree in general that Mel says, though they deal with animals, veterinarians should be able to testify about the effects of a tranquilizer. In general, yes. In terms of human medicine, anesthetics is actually pretty advanced. If you know a little bit about it, I mean, I wrote about it in the McCann case. Anesthetists are doctors who advise other doctors, so it's not sort of just it's not just at the level of a doctor. It's pretty advanced medical science. You've got to know exactly what the right level is of an anesthesia, and anyway, there are quite a few factors involved. Teresa says Suzanne would never have been home alone on any Mother's Day. One's got to ask kind of why were daughters not there on Mother's Day? It seems a bit sad, doesn't it? Not there yet says a good vet would know the effects of tranquilizers on humans. Maybe. Okay, so we at an hour 45. So this definitely concludes our coverage of the affidavit. I might be doing defense motions and also just coverage of the latest, in the legal process between now and the end of this month. And obviously I will be covering the trial, assuming that happens. Sarah Glenn says he can take Ms. Dark out for Valentine's but not spend time with the mother of his children on Mother's Day. Patty Ward says, can we see Timmy before you go? Probably not. I think Timmy's on my bed, kind of out for the count. Timmy, come. Timmy? Timmy, come. Come, boy. Timmy, come. No, I don't think we're going to see him. Sorry about that. I could manipulate him by saying he's going for a walkie, but he's not going for a walkie, and I'd rather not do that to my little doggy. Okay, yeah, so thanks a lot to the mods. Stephanie, thanks for being here. Jean Karras. Jean's actually from Colorado. I think Jean's from Boulder. So she's kind of in the thick of things. Sharon Tuck, thanks for being here as well. Also, thanks for the new members who've signed up. And all the members who are here, Thought Criminal, not there yet, Sarah Glenn, Nisi, Yvonne Phillips, Robbie Robin, Terry Dean, Two Dog Night, all of you guys, and then also the subscribers who've joined in chat. Some really good comments from some of you, and I think you'll agree. I've really looked forward to going through all of this. At first glance, it didn't seem like there's really much in the affidavit, but when you go through it slowly, methodically, carefully, it is actually a pretty well put together document, I thought. Gathering Place, thank you so much. I think this is your fourth consecutive super chat. Thanks so much. Gathering Place says, like my inclination is to decompress. Thought Criminal says, appreciate your time, Nick, and enjoyed the chat's thoughts. Nisi says, can't wait for Van Gogh. Yeah, we're not finished with that. I've got the book right here with me. And so that'll probably be coming up in April. Probably 3 or 4 more episodes on that. I'm playing with the idea of taking you guys through some of Van Gogh's letters. This is a different book, but going back much further back in his backstory, and just trying to get to know Van Gogh even deeper than we knew him. That'll depend on you guys if you're really that interested in Van Gogh. In other words, when we get to the finale of Van Gogh, do we go all the way back to almost like the beginning and look at his his love life, his travails as an early artist and as a pastor and all that kind of thing. Do we really want to get to know this guy? So we'll see. The Alec Baldwin case, I also want to continue with that, but there's not really much happening right now, other than that his wife's pregnant, I think for the 7th time. She's having a 7th baby. Stephanie says, I'll get that book too. Okay. Victoria, good to hear from you. Good to see you here. Great analysis. Thank you. I have tried live after months, feeling invisible here. I'm grateful these videos are recorded. Seems to be the right solution for me. Gathering Places, they have a traveling immersion of his art that is coming to my state in a couple of months. Well, make sure you go to it. I think it's quite awesome. I know what you're talking about. It's sort of, you walk through, it's like walking through his paintings. In fact, this is a flyer I got when I was in France, advertising one of those things, one of those exhibitions, whatever you call it, where you sort of go through, you sort of walk through it's almost like walking through the painting. And it must be quite awesome. It's something I'd like to do. When I was in France, I think I just missed it. So if you can attend it, it's really worth attending. I wonder whether Jean Carris is going to be able to attend court. Do you think you'll be able to attend trial at all? Thanks a lot, Sarah Glenn. Jean, do you think you'll be able to make any of the court cases or court appearances if it does go to trial? It would be quite nice if you could take some photos with your cell phone and we can pop them up here. Paddy Ward says, can you do a show on Will Smith? I suppose I could, but I mean, a lot of people have really discussed that. My kind of bottom line thought on that is, I think it's really up to Chris Rock to decide how he feels about it. So in other words, you can say whatever you like, I can say whatever I like. It's really up to Chris Rock to say, I forgive him, or I want to press charges or whatever. That's kind of the bottom line. I mean, he's the victim. And so he can, he may feel, how can I put it? He may feel he didn't deserve what happened, but maybe he shouldn't have said something. All I'm saying is, I think Chris Rock's position is quite important. I don't think our position is more important than Chris Rock's position. He's the one who suffered that thing, right? Paige Davis says, Van Gogh is so interesting. Teresa says, limited seating in trial, there will be set rules with Judge Lama. I also would predict that we're not going to have live streaming, just because Colorado seems to be quite strict with that. I know in the Patrick Frazee case, there was very strict sort of keeping the media at bay, very, very strictly. Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. I would be interested to know whether Will Smith will be at the Oscars next year. If I could make a prediction, I don't think he will be. You know what I mean? Anyone who wins the Oscar comes back the following year. I would predict / expect that he won't be back next year. We'll see. Of course, a lot could happen between that. He might, him and Chris Rock might have some kind of hug fest and go on Oprah or something, and then everything's resolved. Who knows? Gathering places, Chris Rock ticket sales skyrocket in price. Sold a bunch of tickets for $400. Wow. I hate to reveal my ignorance, but I don't know about the South African woman kidnapped in the US, Naomi. I don't know about that. Sorry about that. I'm just not, haven't kept up with that. I bought my daughter my Van Gogh mugs and coasters as one of her birthday presents. Oh, that's cool. I've got a Van Gogh, I've got two Van Gogh cushions that are, the one is a sunflower painting, the other one is, and I quite like them. They're nice and decorative. I don't know, for some reason, because the next episode in the Van Gogh series is dealing with his funeral. I don't know, I just wanted to postpone that for a while. I'm okay doing it now, but I kind of just didn't really want to deal with it kind of immediately. I guess I'm okay doing it now. Stephanie says, I will send you some info. Man arrested, but Naomi not found yet. Okay. It's a really sad one. How many of you in chat are nurses? How many of you have sort of a little bit of medical background? I know Stephanie works in a pharmacy, but are any of you nurses or ex-nurses? Gathering Places retired nurse. Don't you find it bizarre that, and sorry if this seems self-indulgent, but don't you think it seems bizarre falling off a mountain bike at 32 kilometers per hour and then not being bruised at all, falling on gravel and not having any bruises? I fell on my left side, and I think I fell kind of on this arm, and this arm, I guess, acted as a shock absorber, but there's no bruising whatsoever anywhere. There's no discoloration. I'm talking about where the skin and the muscle is bruised. There's only where some of the skin is sort of shaved off, and then there's internal bruising to a rib. I just find it really mysterious. Like how is that even possible? Unless the gravel was sort of like a kind of like a mattress. I mean, I hit it hard, but maybe I don't know. I just find it really weird. Yeah, not there. It says no bruising at all is surprising. It totally is. I mean, how do you crack a rib on the inside of your body, but there's no bruising on the outside? Paige Davis says, I've been a nurse. Robbie Robbins says veterinary nursing, if that counts. I don't know if that does count, because can you see bruises on animals? Can you see it through the fur? Someone just said that they are veterinarian. Just See if I can find it. Al Anders says, I worry more about your head injury. I didn't hit my head at all. Nisi says, give it a week to rise. Nisi, I don't know if you heard, I actually swam today and I was actually able to pull myself up, my full weight up. So I actually don't know whether I do have a cracked rib. I don't know if that's, I think I've injured the interstitial muscles and some ligaments, but I don't actually think the damage is that bad. I'm able to get in and out of my car now without that much discomfort. No, I'm not like totally pain-free. I'm certainly not actually going to be using medication anymore. Cynthia Nielsen is a veterinarian. So Cynthia, do you know about tranquilizers and their effects on human beings? Let's ask you. Would you know about tranquilizers and the effects of different tranquilizers on people? Paige says it is very possible you skimmed and slid the gravel. In other words, it was like Superman on the gravel, right? The Humble Grower says, I love chat. Cynthia says, I can only surmise based on what they do in animals. Yeah. Do you base it on the weight of the animal versus the weight of a person? Is that sort of how you would sort of make that comparison? What would be how would you sort of do that? And would you think of a tranquilizer for a deer being appropriate? I know it's not really the right word, but being the closest to to using on a person, tranquilizer for a deer, do you think that would be approximate? Paige says, I think your arm is the likely cause of a bruised rib, instinctual to protect your torso. The thing is, I didn't put out my arm. When I fell, I didn't actually put out my arm. In fact, it's this side of my arm that hit the ground. In other words, it wasn't like I did this. So there's absolutely there's a little bit of injury here. But it wasn't like I put my hands out like this to protect myself. I didn't even know I was falling. So I actually hit over here and then it sort of turned like that. So, yeah, I didn't actually, there was no moment where I thought I'm falling, oh no. It was just like instantly, 1 second I was riding, next second I was in the dirt. Jean says Suzanne was so tiny too. Stephanie says you can use sedatives on animals and humans. In the I can't think of the name now. In that case that took place in Canada, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Were they called the Ken and Barbie killers? But the one of the victims was sedated and I think died of a tranquilizer substance that came from a vet store. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? What's the name of that case again? So well known. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The case in Canada. I just can't think of the name. Pauline says your arm must have cushioned the blow to your chest. Homolka, that's it, the Homolka case. That's a case I've actually wanted to write a book about. I've designed a book cover, and I really wanted to cover that case. I just never got round to it. But that, to me, that is probably the most disturbing case that I've not written about and not covered. Very, very disturbing case. Very, very disturbing case. I'll put a link to, it's Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. I'll put a link to it in chat. But that is a case I really meant to cover during my sort of writing spree. Leah Simpson says ketamine is for animals. Now they're using it on humans. Wendy Anderson says Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. So do you guys know that the one victim in that was sedated with some kind of sedative for animals, and then I think she died. I think it was actually the sister of Carla Homolka, yeah, from Vancouver Island. Not there yet says my son is a hunter with 5 amazing kids, shows no signs whatsoever of aggression toward people. That presumption is difficult to accept. Yeah, I'm not saying that a hunter is, doesn't mean, I mean, a friend of mine is a farmer and also a hunter, and he's a very quiet, sweet guy. But can you say that about Barry Morphew, that his the hunting is separate from the crime, that the hunting psychology is completely separate from the psychology of the crime? Can you say that? Yes, the sister. Yeah, it was the sister. That's what sort of makes it so kind of unthinkable. Miss Silk says Dexter was using it too to incapacitate his victims before wrapping them in cellophane. I often wondered, watching Dexter, who is taking notes, because of the nature of that. It was like, it's almost like how-to guide for, to commit the perfect murder again and again and again and again. Kara Cow Young says, I've had both a cracked rib and displaced rib. Keep breathing to keep away pneumonia. I think I've probably got a displaced rib. I can feel the rib move a bit when I change position. Patricia says, women who fall for prisoners are called hyabristaphiles. I don't know how to pronounce that. Hyabristaphiles. Okay. Well, we're already at 2 hours, 10 minutes. I think I'm going to say goodbye to you guys. Sorry about Timmy not showing up. He was lying on my lap earlier, so I suppose when I was downstairs, suppose he felt that was his quality time. Sarah Hathaway says, love Dexter. There was also kind of a creepy element to Dexter. Do you remember when he, when, was it his sister or his half-sister or something, developed feelings for him or something? And then she was also investigating, she didn't know it, but I think she was investigating him. Remember that aspect to it was quite interesting. Any of you watch The Last Kingdom on Netflix? Do any of you have any of you watched that? It's called The Last Kingdom. Dexter Part 2 is not as intense. Thanks, The Humble Grower. Christine says, nice being here. P. Willie says, can chipmunks damage a furnace in a house that doesn't have a furnace? I think he means the hearth, the fireplace. But that was also quite an interesting thing. Paddy Ward says, I didn't like the ending of Dexter 2. The house had a boiler. Okay, guys, I think it's time to bid you guys adieu. Let's see what happens in terms of the legal process. Things are unfolding kind of as we speak, so we'll see what happens. I will kind of keep you guys appraised as and when things happen in April. And as I say, when the trial, if the trial takes place, when the trial takes place, I'll be doing a daily thing. So I'm actually quite looking forward to it. I quite enjoy that. I did that with the Patrick Frazee case and wrote a book about it. And it's really amazing when you pay attention consistently, the level of depth and detail you get. I think it's just true with anything. When you pay the price of consistent investment of your time and energy, your level of intimacy with a subject, whether it's physical fitness, whether it's knowledge about something, goes up a great deal. And so I think it's really worthwhile and meaningful sometimes to pay attention, to pay extra attention to something. So, and all of that does help us with our critical thinking, doesn't it? Good night, lovely people. Good night, guys. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for everyone being here. And just keep your eyes on the community timeline and Twitter for announcements of future episodes. See you guys again. Thanks, Mods. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, you guys. See you guys next time. Take care.